What a special episode you're about to tune into. Welcome again to the 4Q podcast, where we ask the 4 R's in 4 questions. So we ask a question about reflect, redefine, redesign, and realign, because this is the framework of how we live our lives and we move forward. So today I have the lovely Carina O'Brien on from Working Mumma, and you'll hear about her story, but I want to make sure that I mention a couple of things. One is there is a little bit of a trigger warning for this episode because we are talking about pregnancy and loss of pregnancy. That does come up, and so if you or someone you love or someone you know who's going through that, it can be really hard to hear that story. There's so much judgment about different things, and when it comes to parenting and pregnancy, there's just so many opinions out there. So I want to give a big shout out to Carina and to anyone listening again, is that she really put herself out there and gave us the details. She also talks about balancing work and life and pregnancy and all of those things. So I'm not going to keep you any longer because this one is a really good episode, and I definitely recommend that if you know someone who's going through it or has gone through it, let them hear this podcast. I've put in the description where you can find Carina. She said that she's open to people getting in contact and listening again to her story. So I would recommend this to anyone you know going through that. And if you're like me who hasn't experienced that in personally so far, I have friends, but I haven't gone through that myself. There are so many gems in life that you can learn from this. So again, I'm not going to hold you up any longer. Let's jump in. This is the 4Q podcast. Hey, I'm Sheena Shuey. I'm a registered social worker and host of the 4Q podcast. I'm passionate about normalising, not pathologizing life, and that's not easy. So each episode, I have amazing guests on to share the messy, beautiful ups and downs of life in 4 key questions with tips and tricks along the way. There are moments in life where you can embrace your story and understand that it's okay not to feel okay sometimes. So let's get into it. This is the 4Q podcast. Carina, oh my goodness, how are you? I'm so happy to have you on our 4Q podcast today.
Thank you so much for having me. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so we've obviously connected through another sort of business membership group that we're part of, and I've had the privilege of being on your podcast, which already has some amazing people and places and things on there. So I'm feeling really good to have you on mine today.
Thank you. Happy to return the favour. We're both working mamas, so why not help out a fellow working mum?
Exactly. So speaking of, for those who aren't familiar with Carina, Carina's a mum to a 2.5-year-old energetic son, an angel baby, with another on the way and a fur baby. She's a wife, employee, and a founder of Working Mumma, which is a community she set up when going through her own parenting journey. Carina's passionate about supporting working mothers have the confidence and mindset to find that balance between family, career, and self-care to really help them thrive, which for anyone who follows Shavasana Collective, that is what we're all about. She loves sport, going for a run and enjoying a nice glass or two of red wine with her husband, which again, tick from me. So tell me more about yourself, because again, I didn't know you were expecting. So
Yeah. So we've actually kept this one a little bit quiet, and as you'll hear, I've actually had quite a journey, so to speak, around parenting. So with COVID this year, and we experienced probably the both ends of spectrum in 2020 of going through pregnancy loss, and so we very much kept this current pregnancy secret Even I didn't even tell my employer till probably 15, 16 weeks. And so it was quite an emotional early on part. So yeah, we've kept it a little bit quiet. My husband's also not a big fan of social media. He's quite a private person. So that's why you'll never actually generally see a photo of him or my children, minus the fur baby. She does get online, but yeah, it's one of those things that we have been able to keep it quiet. But now I'm like, look, I'm almost 30 weeks, so we can let the cat out of the bag a little bit more.
Yeah, yeah. Well, congratulations, because that's the first that I'm hearing about it. And yeah, I can just imagine what the journey that must have been. So thank you for sharing that with us. So did you want to tell us any more about what you do? So I know that you mentioned that you're working as well. What industry do you work in?
So I work in the engineering and transport space, and I'm a communications manager for a large engineering company, and that definitely keeps me busy. I work 3 days a week, and then I've also got Working Mumma, that is definitely a passion project. I thought about when my son was 6 months old, like when I was actually pregnant at 6 months age, going, how am I going to do this? How am I going to manage the juggle between being a working mum and wanting to pretty much still have a career? I knew that I didn't want to be a stay-at-home mum. It's also something that my husband and I had spoken about. I also know now mentally I'm a better wife, mother, friend, everything. By having that mental outlet. And for me, work is a little bit of that self-care. It's doing something for me and my own identity. So I looked around and wondering what can I do, and that's how I came up with Working Mumma. And it's a community that definitely is evolved, and hopefully in 21 will also continue to evolve even more. So, but I then make sure as well that, you know, I love snow skiing and going up to the snow and being active. And I think that's also something with family holidays that I had as a kid, and certainly something that I like to do as well with my family. So it's yeah, I think there's many different facets, sorry, to my life. And that's what I really enjoy, that I've just not got one focus, but multiple focuses.
Yeah, yeah, definitely. And as a fellow working mum, I definitely know how it can be very interesting balancing all of these things. But I find for me, my so the my I've had 5 jobs in 2020. So when this comes out, this will be 2021, which, so it's crazy. But yes, in 2020, I had 5 different jobs, but I have just accepted a permanent role in one of those jobs. So I'm not going to be changing anymore. But I find for me, my personal business, which is Savasana Collective, and my professional work, they really do align. And so I'm able to pull bits from work because I'm working, you know, as a social worker and as a counselor. So they do click very well because they both feed into each other. But I'm wondering for yours, it's quite a dichotomy there. And maybe that's because of an outsider's perspective, but working in sort of transport and engineering to a working mama supportive, you know, place of working mums, they seem very different. So how do you balance such different styles of working?
I, uh, I'm a communications manager, so a lot of my role is very centered around the audience, the messages, and really bringing people together. I have a strength and an interest of, if people aren't working together or necessarily talking, I'll be the one that'll go, right, let's just organize a meeting, or I'll call someone and try and bring people together. And I run a number of project teams and continuously always just providing those inputs and contributions. So I think with the similarities into Working Mumma is that it's about creating a community, a sense of
Mm.
connection. And really also understanding the audience, and going through those journeys with people. So similar to my work life, I've got to think about the message, the audience, and the delivery. And then with Working Mumma as well, I'm trying to always stay half a step ahead of others, of understanding what are the challenges, what are the you know, what's keeping mums awake at the moment, and then trying to look for ideas and support and, you know, podcast episodes around what's going to help them. So for example, I recently put out a survey, just like what you would in the business world, of understanding what are the challenges, what have you got going on at the moment, and how can we potentially help and really facilitate that. So even though the industries and the audiences are very different, I have to say, working for a large company, sometimes you get caught up in the red tape, but then having your own business, as you know, you can make a split decision and just run with it, and it's your own mistakes, and I really enjoy that. So for me, I've got my formal life, and then I've then also got my creative outlet. So that's how I think I'm able to also, if I get frustrated a little bit with work, I know that I can put those energies into working mama and just do whatever I want anyway.
Exactly, exactly. So fantastic. I love that because, again, from an outsider's perspective, I didn't see how they fit, but hearing you explain that, it just fits so beautifully. So let's get into the second R of our 4Q podcast. So we've done the reflect, and so now we're up to the redefine. And redefine is really about, that redefining a new perspective or meaning in the way that you see things. And usually that's hard moment that's changed things for you. So can you tell us about a moment that you've had?
Yeah, and look, I will give a trigger warning to people before I get into this topic. So we are going to talk about pregnancy and loss. So for me, I've had quite a journey in pregnancy. Our first pregnancy, almost 4 years ago now, resulted in a miscarriage. I didn't even know that I was even pregnant. We're about to head away on our honeymoon, and unfortunately had to delay it a week because we found that it was a pregnancy that unfortunately for about 4 weeks, I didn't even know, as I said, I was bleeding for 3 weeks and didn't even know I was pregnant. So, and then after that, it then took us 15 months to then fall pregnant with our son. And during that process, it was quite emotional. It was very hard because you'd go along to specialist appointments and it would be, oh, you've got this wrong. So I've got what's called a bicornuate uterus, which is like a heart-shaped uterus, which does have its challenges. I've got an underactive thyroid, and a range of different of issues. And so it seemed to be that when I was trying to fall pregnant with my son, every specialist appointment, you'd hear something else of like, oh, you've got low egg count, or there's so, and then I would have at the same time friends announcing, oh, we've just suddenly fallen pregnant and without any issues, and it's all easy and okay. And I was strong to friends and I was very excited, and particularly when one of my closest friends called me to say I'm pregnant, I was like, I was so excited for her, and she knew the journey we were on. And I call it a journey because everyone has a different experience. And she says, I'm so sorry. I said, don't be apologetic at all. I said, I'm very excited for you. I've got my own story and you've got your own story. And I was able to sort of try and separate it out there, but it's something that you did have. I couldn't, and it's very easy to get resentful of others that have been in those situations. So we then had we had my son, and that was all good. And then 12 months ago, we were like, right, we're ready for another child. And just before Christmas, about I think it was like the 1st of December or 2nd of December. Found out that we were pregnant again, which was a bit of a shock. It did happen a little bit quicker than what we were expecting. So I remember like, wow, okay, this is all going to happen. It was very unexpected, but in a good expectation and a good news and that. So of course, around Christmas, you can't, as what everyone knows, Karina enjoys a good glass of champagne and a glass of red wine. So it was hard to keep secret from a lot of people, being Christmas. And then we went along for the standard, what we thought was a standard 13-week scan. And we had the scan and they're saying, oh, everything's looking okay. The sonographer then went away, and she was away for about 15 minutes and we didn't know what was going on. We were like, this is a bit odd. My husband went down to put more money in the meter and came back, and we're like, oh, she's still not back. What's going on? They then came to me and said, oh, you need to go for a second scan and there's an abnormality. And we're like, oh, what's that? And so I didn't really think too much of it. And so we sent off my husband to back to work, and I then went for a second scan, and they said, look, you've actually got there's an abnormality, but we'll have to still see what's going on. Then doing some research after that, and it was coming out of that scan, I think I was strong during it, and it wasn't until I had to actually verbalize it to my husband. It's one of those things I couldn't even initially get the words out of my mouth of saying, guess what's happened, and just that shock, because as any parent would know, you expect to go to those 13-week scans, everything's okay, it's all going to be fine. And you were like, we had an abnormality of 1 in 32,000. I won't go into the details, but anyone that knows, it's just one of those freak things. And we were like, how did this happen? And it's just a freak thing that may have happened at like 4 weeks. And then that afternoon, I actually went into hospital to meet my sister's new son. So it was very hard. You're going from the extreme of hearing literally the worst news of your life to then seeing what happened. We then went for a subsequent scan at 15 weeks. And they said, look, it's actually worse than what we were originally expecting. And so essentially your child would have a disability for life. And so we had pretty much 24 hours to make a decision whether to proceed or terminate based on medical grounds. And it was one of those things that the more that we thought about the life that we wanted, thought about that life is really tough in the first place for a child. Like there's bullying and everything. I think life is really challenging, let alone with an added disability. And we don't know what the world's going to be like in 10, 15, 20 years time. But the more we weighed it up, it was actually the hardest decision we'll ever have to make. And of course, there's naturally always going to be guilt and regret that carries with a decision like that for the rest of your life. But yeah, we then had to terminate at 16 weeks. So it's the hardest thing I've ever had to do, and I will never ever stop thinking about. We know it was another boy, and you never stop thinking about him. You think about what it would have been like, what it would have been, and so now we're pregnant with our angel baby, which then has a very different connotation around it. People are like, oh wow, you're pregnant, and it's so exciting. I'm like, you've got no idea the journey we've necessarily been on emotionally as well. Even falling pregnant again, there was a lot of anxiety for those 13 weeks. And that first scan, I was there in the bed, and I'm just like, right. And they say, no, it's all healthy. And I'm like, really, can you just check again? Like, I just want to make sure everything's okay. And so yeah, it's a very long story, but I have to say, definitely pregnancy loss and making a decision based on medical grounds is definitely the hardest thing that I've definitely ever had to do in my life. That's for sure.
Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing that with us, because I know that's not easy to just share to a complete stranger. And for those who are listening as well, one of the hardest things you've ever gone through. But I guess there's two things. Is one, I'm just conscious of the listeners who either know someone who's been through this, or maybe going through it themselves, or maybe have gone through this, or are pregnant just like yourself, that you survived and you made it through. And I have seen the amazing work you've been doing this year with Working Mumma. And it's amazing how, besides all of that stuff you've been going through, you're still able to lift a community, because as a working mum, there's a lot of, it's a roller coaster of emotions sometimes. So, that's really beautiful. And again, thank you for that. I do have a couple of questions, if you're okay to answer just a little bit deeper, if that's okay.
Yeah, go for it.
So I guess in my industry, something that we struggle with is, so I am a social worker with a psychology background. And so we often work in hospital settings or doctor's offices or whatever. And we tend to bring the human touch to a medicalized kind of field because, it's like they've got the medical, we've got the human, okay? And something that comes up in therapy all the time is bedside manner and the delivery of things like what you've just gone through, and diagnoses, and just the confusion during that time. And when I was listening to your story, I was wondering about that first initial scan when he said, or she said, there's an abnormality. I mean, that's a very vague term. It could mean anything. And like you say, initially you're just like, oh, okay, like lots of things could be abnormalities. Like you don't know on the severity scale, is this a big or little, or I'll just go for another scan. Like, did you have any idea of what could possibly come? Or was it very vaguely delivered to you?
It was vague initially. They said, look, this is what's happening, and we just need to go. Because they I guess there's different levels, just like all industries. We had still an experienced sonographer, and then we went to someone that had, doctor that obviously could do it a lot better. They said, look, still it's early. I think it's one of those things. In an ultrasound, you can tell certain things, but you can't tell everything. And still at 13 weeks, they're like, look, there's still, things forming and that. So you never know. But it's, one of those things. Look, I have to say, during my whole experience, and I had a number of medical professionals that we liaise with, from sonographers to my own obstetrician. So I go private, and she's been on the parenting journey with us and been absolutely amazing, through to even the final sonographer that delivered the news. And even when we went in for the termination, I have to say it was initially cold at the start, but then they were really supportive at the end. So I think, definitely the way you deliver information to people is so important. And at no point along our journey did I feel judged, did I feel to be made guilty. Everyone always said, look, here's the facts. You can make it. We'll let you make up the decision. And I think that's also one thing through our whole journey. As much as people may have had an opinion, rightly or wrongly, of what we should have done, no one's actually ever said to us, you made the wrong decision, or everyone always said to us, we'll back what you want to do. And I think that for us has been really important. And I talk about us, being my husband and I, because it wasn't a decision I made on my own. We made it as a team together. And I think also, me talking about how things are and with support people, you need that with you. But I have to say, the medical fraternity with us, the more that we got to know information and people were able to put together more of a story, they were supportive, which was, I have to say, good in our experience. But I know not everyone has that experience.
Yeah. Well, I'm so glad that you had a good experience. And I thought I would just check in, because unfortunately, there are people who don't. So, and just acknowledging that that's fear, like it is such a spectrum of, of medical people that you have. So I'm so happy to hear you had that supportive network around you, and your husband as well. And I know that that's a big part of this too, is your husband in this sphere. All right, so I'm curious about, the redesign. So our third R in our podcast is around, after this hard moment, what did you do to redesign the way that you do things in everyday life? So sort of, what did you do to make your life better or different after this? And the way that we ask this is because often when we go through those really hard life-changing moments, it is life-changing, whether it's we decide, okay, I'm not going to life is short, I'm not going to have time for toxic people anymore, or I'm actually going to pursue my dreams and do what I want. Like, whatever the perspective shift is, it's about actually implementing that now. So can you tell me a little bit about what was life like after, and what did you do to redesign life?
I have to say, it's been quite a journey. And I won't say that I'm even at the end of the journey. I have to say that this experience has definitely changed my outlook, my opinion on certain things as well. And so I think it's, as I said, it is a journey. It's a growth phase. And we have been, and I certainly know that I've been through the emotions of, I think it's what the 7 stages of grief, and anger and resentment and question and guilt as well. You're thinking, why has this happened to me? What has my body done? What could I have done differently? And I remember distinctly one night, very soon after my husband had gone to bed, and I jumped onto the phone and I started Googling, which I have to say is the stupidest and worst thing I can possibly do, going down the black hole of Google. And because as I've spoken to someone recently on the Working Mumma podcast, you can keep going on Google the way that you want to go and get the answers you want, as opposed to actually having a real open mind about it. And so that's definitely one thing as well, is don't go into Google and try and Dr. Google or self-diagnose in that way. It's from a mental health perspective, actually can be quite harmful. And I actually then got a lot of guilt after that. I was sent by my mother's group, and I have to say, probably I'll take a step back. One thing that's really Regis, and I've really reflected on what I've done, is the support from others. And I would say, and having that tribe around you. My number one support person, and I would say my rock, has been my husband. He has, he lent into his emotions as well. Like I've never seen him cry until this year, and he was there. We both were in it together. And I have to say, I can understand why loss at any stage of life can really impact a marriage. You can either make or break it. And I can really see the stresses and emotions that comes from that. And I'd say that for us, it has strengthened our marriage. And, with the last few months, we're buying and selling houses, and that's stressful as well. So we've decided to throw everything into 2020.
Yeah.
But definitely that, and having a tribe and a supportive group around you is really important. And I learned very soon after who was my real support people. So I had some close friends of mine from Mother's Group send me a bear from Bears of Hope. And if you have ever experienced loss, highly recommend getting in touch with Bears of Hope. They've got some great Facebook groups to support people on, and also just to be there for families as well. So they sent me a bear, which then opened me up to the Bears of Hope communities, which then have really shown that I'm not alone in my journey. And if I've had a bad day, I can easily post on that group, or there's someone else that's going through what I've been through, because I've subsequently learnt, 1 in 4 pregnancies end in miscarriage, and who knows even what the late stage, and miscarriage is before 20 weeks, but I know of a lot of stories subsequently of people that have had stillbirths that have had, loss between that 20 and 40 weeks. So it is the gift of life, and it's a real journey. So I think that Bears of Hope have really have got me there. And also, this might sound weird, but actually sharing my story with others to make them know that they're not alone. So I did a post with Working Mumma. I said, for 1 week, I actually recorded a podcast with Amanda Bowles, from the founder of Bears of Hope. And I was like, right, okay, for 1 week, I'm going to concentrate on miscarriage and pregnancy loss as a content focus. And I put up this post of saying I'm in 1 in 4, and it was amazing the response that people got, and said I'm 1 in 4 as well. And some people actually hadn't even publicly let people know they'd had a miscarriage, but they were reaching out online to say, yep, I'm there as well, and I'm one of those. And so it was actually very humbling, because I was a little bit scared about putting my story out there, and I thought, I don't want sympathy. I want other women to know that they're not alone, that they don't have to be in this. And I think, and one thing as well, I've realised that pregnancy loss is probably one of the most hardest and isolating periods of your life that it possibly can be, because not everyone's been through it. It's hard to go through it, to explain as well what you're going through. And I also saw a psychologist early on, because I was like, look, I don't know if I'm coping. Am I doing this right? It's one of those questions of how am I managing my emotions? Yeah. So I went along to a psychologist appointment. My husband came along as well, just more of as a support. And I have to say, she's speaking to someone, and a professional as well. It's not just your best friend or anything. She was amazing. She actually gave me permission to lean into my feelings rather than trying to compartmentalize. And I've got a history of probably compartmentalizing certain things. And I thought that was a strength, but I've actually since learnt that by actually speaking to someone is actually really opened up my eyes, and it's a real strength, because people go, oh, it might be seen as a weakness. Oh, I'm speaking to someone, or maybe I'm a bit weak. But definitely, I would love everyone that's listening, if you've just got a moment and you're thinking that you're not dealing with it, don't be afraid to reach out and speak to someone. It can be either a free helpline or go to see a psychologist or someone. But she gave me permission and said to me, you're dealing with it as like any other normal person would, but it's okay to lean into those feelings. And I think by then from that moment, I was then able to lean in. So at times, if I was having a moment or a bad day, or I just wanted to just cry, I could. And I gave myself permission. I didn't necessarily and as I say, I still have my moments, particularly, and there are trigger points around due dates and things like that that are hard, but I also don't try and put it off. I'm like, okay, I have my moment. I almost release that energy and I release those emotions that then allows me to move on and that. So I know it's a very long-winded answer, but
No,
and I apologize for
no.
that.
No, I think that's really important, because I think it's good to hear it from someone who's gone through it. So for me as a therapist, I can easily, put a reels out or put a post up about, heal it. To heal it, you need to feel it, right? But actually hearing, what does feel it to heal it look like? It's exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay, I've woken up and, excuse the language, but today's a really shitty day. And that's okay. I'm not going to fight it. I'm not going to work through it. I'm not going to push through it. It's okay to have a mental health day, because it's about being proactive and not like fighting it. Like, again, like it's knowing that the anniversaries are going to be bad. So instead of saying, I'm just going to pretend it's not happening, suck it up and just keep going on with life, like, take that day off, or maybe make it a ritual, make it something special, rather than pushing it down. Right?
Yeah, and I think also leaning into those emotions. So as what your podcast is around is about those hard days. And look, no life is ever perfect, and that's what I've learned. But one thing I've now, it's okay to lean in to those emotions. What I've also then learned to sort of pretty much said to myself, and even during anxieties around COVID and things like that, I've said, okay, I'll give myself a couple of days and then I need to move on, or I need to write it, journal it, or something like that to let it out. I think by internalizing, it's like this real negative energy, which doesn't help anyone. But by trying to release it, and it can be released in a multitude of different ways. It can be for going for a run or journaling or crying, whatever works for you. But I think releasing it and getting it out is definitely so important, and also really helps as well.
Yeah. And one thing, I'm just aware of the time as well, but one thing I do want to touch on is, what I find interesting is, as you mentioned, 1 in 4 pregnancies will end up in miscarriage, and that's under 20 weeks. So we know that the numbers could possibly be higher. And given that the rates are so high, and we have this in mental health, right? So 1 in 2 of us will experience a mental health issue in our lifetime. 1 in 5 people are experiencing a mental health issue this year, like 1 out of 5 people that you know. So for me, I'm always shocked when things have such a large number of people experiencing it, yet nobody's talking about it, or it's still this thing that's like taboo or strange if you share it. And because I'm in this field, I'm just like a vulnerable oversharer, oh yeah, I've gone through this and this, and every psychologist I meet in social work, we're all the same. So when we're around people who aren't in our field, we're like, of course, share your story, but I have to remember that it is hard, and it is there is something around it still. So could you just share a little bit more on your experience with that? Or your thoughts on that as well, just something that could be so common yet still so much it's not talked about all that much. I didn't really know. I've had a few friends share that stat in the last sort of 2 years about the 1 in 4, but really before that I really had not heard that statistic. And I'm in a field similar too, so
Yeah, I think it's one of those things that I think even in human nature, we'll talk about our wins to an extent with tall poppy syndrome, but we won't necessarily share with each other if we're having a bad day, or it's just like in parenting. Oh, my child's not sleeping, or you're going through a really crap phase at the moment. And there's actually a vulnerability there of, I think in society, everyone wants to, be that Instagram image, which if you go onto my Instagram, it's definitely not anything perfect, that's for sure. But of actually being vulnerable and opening yourself up for that vulnerability, because I think people in this day and age are actually scared of being cut down and being made to feel like you're not good enough or anything like that. But I think knowing it really does define who your true friends are. Like a really close friend of mine said to me, and she announced that she was pregnant on this one day, and we're catching up for coffee, and she said, "Is it okay to talk about it? Can I ask you about it? And, remember the journey and stuff." And I said, "You know what? Yes." And I said, "Thank you for asking." And I think as well that it's about your support people, because with loss, you never know what to say. You don't know what to say to the person. You don't know how to act. And I think in life, we all naturally want to be able to fix things that are wrong. Like my son just before fell over, scabbed his knee. And of course, we want to be able to put a Band-Aid on it and fix it straight away. And I think with loss and even with mental health, there's no Band-Aid. You can't put a Band-Aid around it. And it's a journey as well that these people will go on. I know in pregnancy loss, you're never necessarily going to get over that grief. It's going to sit with you for the rest of your life. And I think even a couple of weeks ago, Meghan Markle coming out and announcing that she'd had a miscarriage. And then I heard discussions after that that came from it. So I think as more people at different levels of influence talk about it, hopefully going forward, we won't necessarily have to feel that we're bad. It's also that first 12 weeks of pregnancy, of keeping everything a secret and things like that. Sometimes you do keep things a secret for certain reasons if you have experienced loss and that. So I've been on the both ends of sharing we're pregnant at 5 weeks versus sharing we're pregnant at 15. Two very different experiences for different reasons. So I think it's both, I think, society as well as the individuals being prepared for it. But if you've actually got the right people around you, I think don't be afraid, because you'll be also, again, ask for support, ask for help. And by opening yourself up, you never know what help you'll get. And it comes in so many different forms of support as well.
Oh, definitely. And I think one of the things I always talk about in my one-on-ones with people is that vulnerability is the ultimate filter in terms of relationships in your life, because when you show up your full authentic self, like wounds, cuts, scars, but also your beautiful self, like I think you're right in that everybody wants to be there for your wedding and for like your engagement, like the fun things, but who's really there through the tough times? And when you show up and you say, this is something I've gone through, so I think when people show up with vulnerability in their true selves, you really do see, as you mentioned, who's really there, who really cares, and who's actually meant to be in your life. Because if they are uncomfortable with that emotion, or they're uncomfortable with you sharing it, or they do have judgment, that person's not meant to be in your life, are they? So
no, you want people around there. You want people in your life and in all facets of your life, from being a working mum, celebrating your highs and your lows. They're going to be there to help lift you up, and also be there to celebrate the good times, and be there to help pick you up for the bad times.
Yeah, exactly. It can't all be good times. I mean, that would be so boring and bland, wouldn't it?
Exactly.
So I guess our final so we've done the reflect, the redefine, the redesign, and then realign. So where you are at now. So what do you do now to sort of, for your current joy and your life and your happiness, what do you do now to stay on track and really keep, calm and clear and content? And is there any sort of advice or actionable steps that you could give to people, whether they've gone through this experience or not? Any sort of general advice?
Definitely for people that have been through and experiencing pregnancy loss, as I say, don't ever think that you're going to necessarily get over it, and it's okay to still hold on to that. And I think that's one of the biggest pieces of advice, that it's okay to not be okay, if that sounds weird.
No, it's perfect.
And as I said, another piece of advice, and I've already mentioned this, is about leaning into your feelings. And that's one of the biggest learnings I have to say for 2020 would be leaning into how you feel. And there's been a variety of different emotions for anyone you are. And also, if you're going through really hard times and really stressful times, like as I said, I'm currently selling houses, and I've been through a real roller coaster of emotions. And you know what, the other night I just had to lean in, and I actually just cried, and my husband helped pick me up a little bit, and he said, no, it's going to be okay and it'll all work out and things. I did acknowledge, yeah, it was been pretty average, but it's also, as I said, just lean into those emotions. Don't try and bottle it up. And certainly for me, I'm a really big one on self-care. No matter where you're at, take a moment. And I remember actually going for a walk. It was in mid-July. We're in Melbourne in 2020, and I took the dog for a walk, and we're in heavy stages of lockdown. And it was really weird. I went on this walk, I was listening to a podcast, but I randomly started crying. And it was just, I think, so much going on with life in Melbourne at that stage, and we're only halfway through the year. But I actually lent into it. I was like, okay, that's fine. But also going for a walk, releasing those emotions was actually really good. I came back mentally refreshed. And I think also just by having those moments of self-care, doing what works for you. And because, being a mum, being a wife, and just life in general is busy. But taking a moment and doing those little things, and it doesn't have to be big, it could just be a small little thing, and actually helping others, or going for walks, getting a hair appointment or something like that, even just a coffee on your own. And it doesn't always have to be on your own. Like sometimes my son fills my cup. He does something and I'm like, oh, you're just like, he makes me laugh. And it's just, and even family time. And that for me, I look at pregnancy as a very different way. I don't look at people. My obstetrician the other week said to me, what's your birth plan? I said, I just want a healthy child. I want to walk through my home with a healthy baby. And I said, I don't care what it takes me to get there. I said, you tell me what I need to do. I trust her immensely. And I said, if I need drugs, or I need a cesarean, or I can go natural, you tell me what I need to do. And I said, because my main goal is about a healthy baby. And I think that's what has really changed my perspective on a lot of things this year is, yes, sometimes the journey to get there can be pretty tough, but think about the end game. And that's how I'm getting a lot of clarity, even through this pregnancy, of someone telling me it's a different pregnancy. And that's also a piece of advice that I actually received of, if for subsequent loss of, tell yourself it's a different pregnancy. It's a different set of chromosomes. It's a different makeup to an extent. But think about it as different. It's not to say that exactly that the same thing's going to happen. Sometimes it does, unfortunately, to people. And I even remember going off for this baby's scan, and I actually stood out the front because I couldn't go out. Going with my husband. And I actually I stopped for a moment, had a little bit of emotion, and I said to myself, this is a different pregnancy. And I said it probably to myself 20 times, but just to change my mental process of, no, I can't go in negative. I've got to think positive, and definitely that mental reframing as well is another big tip and basic piece of advice of reframing your brain. And if you're going in that deep black hole, be aware of it, be conscious of it. Don't let yourself go down that rabbit hole for too long, but make sure you get out and try and reframe your brain to where you should and want to go. So
yeah,
I could talk about this all day. As you could probably tell, I'm pretty passionate about it, but I think definitely listen to your mind, body and soul.
Yeah, exactly. And I think as well, it's really important that you mentioned that seeing a psychologist and seeing one with your husband too. I think sometimes, you got to do what's right for you, whether that's by yourself, with your husband. But I guess you I loved how you said you weren't sure if that's exactly what you needed, but you just thought you would go anyway, because I think it's so much better to go proactively going, okay, I've just had a really rough month, rough year, whatever. I'm just going to check in on myself and see it as an act of self-care. Like if your hip's a bit bung, right? You go, do you wait until you can't walk before you see the physio, or like the chiro or whoever, or do you actually go, you know what, it's niggling me a little bit. I think I'm going to go now. I really do feel that people should be like that with their mindset and their mental health. Like if something's a little bit niggly, or that you've just done something really big like that, you've gone through something big, be proactive, go see someone. And it's personal growth, right? It's just like seeing a doctor when you've got a little sniffle, or seeing a physio when you've got a little niggle. Don't wait until you've got a mental breakdown and then try to come back from there. So Carina, there were so many little gems today that I'm just gonna pull. But thank you for being so vulnerable and sharing that story with us. I'm sure whoever listens to this, if they've ever gone through pregnancy loss or are going through it, they are really going to get a lot out of it. And for anyone who hasn't, I think there's a lot of life learning and lessons to be learned here. So again, thank you so much. Now, we all know you've mentioned the Working Mumma stuff. Where can people find you if they want to connect?
So I'm on Instagram and under Working Mumma Community. So if you're looking for Mumma, it's MUMMA. We've also got a free Facebook community, Working Mumma Community, then website. Also got podcast, the Working Mumma podcast. But very much, if you search Working Mumma or myself, it'll come up, and happy to connect with you, and look forward to hearing your story and sharing it as well.
Yes, thanks so much, Karina. I will share all of your details in the podcast notes, and I'm sure, it's going to be a good one. I just feel it. So I will speak to you next time.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. And those that have experienced loss, I'm here for you. And check out Bears of Hope as well. A big shout out to them, and have a great day.
Thank you. See you later. Bye.
Bye.
All right, so wasn't that amazing? I told you it would be. So what can we get from that podcast? Well, I guess when it comes to loss, not just pregnancy loss, but loss of any kind, we want to fix it. We have this tendency where we want to jump in and fix it and make the bad things go away. But like Karina said, it's about leaning into those emotions. Another way that I like to say it is you have to feel it to heal it. When you have feelings, if you bottle them up, the analogy we often use in therapy or one-on-ones is it's like shaking up a Coke can. If you keep pushing everything down, it's going to explode at some point. So it's better to just feel things in increments and as they come up for you, because it is telling you something. Your feelings are there to tell you something. But biggest things is about having a great support network, understanding who's really there for you, seeing a psychologist proactively, huge. Like knowing that, okay, I've gone through something big, even if I feel like I'm handling things relatively well, I'm still going to go, because it's better to be proactive than reactive when it comes to my health and my physical health. So, and also remembering that 1 in 4 pregnancies under 20 weeks, so that might be more, ends in miscarriage. And so it's more than likely that one of your friends, your family have gone through this. So just being aware of that and being sensitive to that can be really helpful. If you have any questions, please feel free to contact us at Savasana Collective. And of course, I've put the details for Karina so you can get in touch with her. I hope you got out a lot from this podcast. I know that I certainly did. And we will see you next episode. Okay, bye for now.